When we begin each class, we do a silly type of exercise where we go around the room and we ask one another, how would you rather feel in your body today? Would you rather feel flexible, strong, loose? Or would you rather feel tight and restricted? And the answer is obvious. And we ask, how would you rather be spoken to in the world? Would you rather be spoken to with respect or with disrespect? And the answer is obvious. We ask, how would you rather be in your mind? Would you rather feel enthusiastic, clear, or would you rather feel anxious and stressed out? And the answer is obvious, right? And then so, generally, and we all go around and we look, maybe there's some new friends, first timers, or we go around and we're like, look, we all want the same thing in body, speech, mind. And we sort of up the ante of that, silly little exercise by saying, would you rather experience the most meaningful life possible, or would you rather remain in a state of confusion, purposelessness, sense of meaninglessness, and so on? And the answer is very obvious, right? Right? So then I will throw in a silly little sort of anecdote. I don't know if there are 7-Elevens in North Carolina, but there are 7-Elevens in Texas. And before GPS, we used to try to go to 7-Eleven to get Slurpees, which are like an ice slushy, if no one's familiar with that. Anyway, so sometimes I'd be at a friend's house hanging out, and I wasn't really familiar with the area too well. But I would say, I'm going to go get us some Slurpees, to not interrupt the video game or the swimming or whatever was going on. One of us would go on the Slurpee mission, right? And then sometimes it'd be 3 hours till the person got back or we get lost or whatever. We really want to go get the Slurpee, but we don't know how to get there. And it takes us forever to get back and so on. Anyway, the point is that if we really, really, really want to experience life in a certain way, and we never actually do that, the question is why, right? Why is it that if I really want to experience the maximum possible meaning, that I don't? And the answer, like the 7-Eleven analogy, is because we don't know how to get there. We don't know how to create that. Right? So doesn't it make sense then to learn how to create that? Right. And that's what the path of meditation is for. The path of meditation is the path toward meaning, toward purpose, and so on. Okay? So just a little preparation before we talk about. So when we say the word meditation, it's like saying the word sports. It's like if someone came to you and said, I play sports, you would have a general idea of what that person does, but you wouldn't really understand the specifics of it. You'd have to ask, what type of sport do you play? Excuse me. Maybe, for example, I played baseball. And so I played in Little League, and then I played sort of in Junior League, and then I played in middle school, and then I had some summer league teams, and then I played in high school junior varsity, and then I played varsity, and then I was starting on varsity, and then I was kind of good, so I was all conference, and then my senior year I was first team all state, and then I went to play college, but not just whatever divisions. I played Division I college, and I played on a team in college that won the NCAA sort of conference and went to the tournament and so on. And then that was the end for me. But some people will go on and play in the minor leagues, and then they'll go to play in the major leagues, and maybe they'll be all-stars in the major leagues, or maybe they'll be Hall of Famers, or maybe they'll have records and so on, right? So even within the specific athletic domain, there's a wide range of proficiencies, right? There's a wide range of capacities and skill sets. So when we say the word meditation, we're basically pointing to this very broad domain of different types of activities, all right? Now, so just to say that, So we understand that the word meditation is pointing in a direction of a wide range of activities. Now, how do we sort of categorize those things? So there's two main branches of meditation, right? The first is concentration, and the second is critical thinking or analytical thinking. Okay? Concentration meditation looks like this. Focus on your breath. Try to relax your body, or pay attention to your thoughts, or focus on an object of meditation. Focus on a mentor. Focus on a picture of something. Focus on a memory. Focus on a feeling. Visualize yourself as this thing or that thing. Create a mandala, whatever. Anything where the exercise is attempting to help us focus on something, on an object. That's a concentration meditation. And I say that concentration meditation changes how we are, but it doesn't change who we are. Okay? The big time stuff that we're looking for, the meaning and all of that stuff, comes from changes of identity, not just changes of attitude or changes of behavior. Okay? But the point of concentration meditation is to learn to become more sensitive to the object. To become more sensitive to the object of meditation. Whether that is my wife or husband or child or parent or memory or something. Right? The more sensitive that we become, we use the word, there's this idea of the beloved or something like this. We say that because it touches our heart in a certain way. So the more sensitive we become to the beloved, the more capable we become of acting or reacting or interacting with the beloved in a way that is constructive for both of us. Right? So that is the point of concentration meditation. To develop a sensitivity to the objects of our experience. So that if we wanted to, we could act in a way where both of us benefited through that interaction, exchange. Okay? Concentration meditation does not address the motive to act to benefit self and other simultaneously. And that's what critical thinking or analytical thinking meditation is for. Okay? Critical thinking or analytical thinking meditation looks like this. Well, when you say memory or mentor or wife or husband or child or whomever or whatever the object of your meditation is, when you're referring to that, what exactly do you mean? What is the thing that actually constitutes that object that you're trying to focus on? Right? And the funny thing is, if we're really, really, really sincere about thinking critically as an exercise, what we find is that in searching for that object, we find everything else except the object. We find networks of influence. We find relationships. We find specific causes. We find larger conditions in which those causes even had the opportunity to take root and so on. As I make the joke, it's like we're sitting in the Center for Compassion and Sustainability in Raleigh. But if there were no Raleigh, we wouldn't be here. If there were no North Carolina, there'd be no Raleigh. If there were no United States of America, there'd be no North Carolina. If there was no continent, North American or whatever, there'd be no that. If there's no Earth, there's no none of that. If there's no space, there's no sun, there's no solar system, there's no supernovas, there's no atoms and electrons, and oh my God, it's crazy. There's no strong force of the universe holding everything together, right? And that's just at the obvious experiential level, right? Without even thinking about the psychological substructures of things, the values and so on, the influence, the conditions, social, genetic, and so on, right? So whenever we look at an object, we find a lot of other things. In a way, everything except the object. Now, what is the point of that? Right? In the same way that the point of concentration is to develop sensitivity to the object so that I can act to benefit it. right? The point of critical thinking is to want, is to learn to want to act to benefit self and other simultaneously. Because when we turn our inquiry or investigation not towards the object over there, but towards our sense of self, we find that our sense of self can't exist alone, apart. We don't exist in a vacuum. Our existence, like the object, is inextricably bound to a ridiculous amount of other things, other causes, other conditions, other factors, other influences. That who we are is a product of an inconceivable network of relationships and causes and conditions, right? So what critical thinking or analytical thinking does when we do it sincerely is it begins to extend our heart out to other things, other people who have influenced us. It broadens our scope of perceived connectivity and concern, right? Okay. So meditation as a practice is generally one of those two things. All right. Now, the meditation project that we're doing, as you can see, if you've been in class or if you're looking now down at the screen, if you downloaded the PDF, the practice itself is divided into 4 parts: centering, thanking, forgiving, and creating. Centering as an exercise is the concentration dimension of practice. What does centering look like? It doesn't just look like get into your body, get into this room, focus on your breath, relax, try to bring a certain amount of stillness to your mind. It's also notice that you have an inherent preference, and that inherent preference is toward mobility, fluidity, relaxation, feelings of safety, feelings of connection, and so on. Notice that. Not just that you have a body or that you're breathing, but that you want to have access to a certain quality of motion, a certain quality of air, a certain quality of feeling, and so on. Right? And notice that you're not the only one in the universe who wants that. That everybody else wants that. Notice that. That's concentration. That's centering. Okay? That is centering. Not just relaxing body, speech, mind, but becoming aware of the fact that you want body, speech, mind to operate in a certain way. And then on top of that, so does every other human being. Okay? The more that we do that practice, the more centered we become. And then I make the joke about like Roman Empire or something. The more centered you become, the more you can extend your line of energy out across the universe, essentially. You can have a headquarters that's so strong, you can send an army across continents in a way. Army of love, or however you want to conceive of that. But that's the idea. The more centered you are, the more capable you become of extending yourself out, of giving yourself. Okay? So obviously then, the more centered we become, the more thankful we can become. And again, why would you want to do the thanking exercise? It's like, well, I'm speaking English. I didn't make this language. My ability to express the most meaningful thing in my life to you depends upon a language that I didn't create and that I didn't teach myself, right? There was a point in time where it was just a bunch of symbols that meant nothing. And then someone taught me how to interpret those symbols, how to organize them, right? So, again, the more centered we become, the more concentrated we become, the more we're able to see our dependence upon other factors, people, phenomena, and so on, right? The more that we can see that, the more that we're able to be thankful for that. For a mentor, for a professor, a high school teacher, a parent, a child, a vacation, an experience that has impacted us in profound ways. Right? The more centered we can become, the more thankful we can become. The more thankful we are, the more we're able to open our hearts out to others. The more that we can open our hearts out to others, the more connected we feel. Right? The more connected we feel, the more safe we feel, the more peaceful. The more that there's a reason for us to do all sorts of things. Right? The more connected we feel, the more meaning we experience, the more purpose, and so on. Right? So it makes sense to learn not just to be thankful for things, but to learn how to become centered so that we can become more thankful. It's like I make the joke about, I want to give you $100. I really, really want to give you $100. Well, I need to have $100. Right? In order to do anything well in life, we need to be able to invest ourselves in that thing. So the more that I've brought my mental capacities under my command, let's say, the more that I've brought my speech, I've harnessed that. The more that I've harnessed my body, the more that I've harnessed my understanding of the commonality that I share with all other human beings, the more that I've harnessed all of those resources, the more that I can give those things, right? Now, so part three is where we enter a really deep shift in identity, right? Because it's easy to be thankful for things that have had a constructive impact or influenced us in constructive ways. But it's more difficult to try to extend our heart out in empathy or compassion or love or well wishes to things that have harmed us, right? So the forgiving exercise, each one of these four components compounds upon the previous, right? The more centered I am, the more thankful I am. The more thankful I am, the more my heart goes out. The more my heart goes out, the more forgiving I can become, right? And what is the basis? There's a common sense basis for forgiveness, and it's really in two things. The only reason that we've ever harmed anyone else or have been harmed is two things. One is that we didn't know any better, right? And whenever we've done something and we've said, I didn't mean that, or that wasn't my intention, or I didn't know any better, that statement, the statement or the confession of ignorance in a way, is a plea for forgiveness. In saying that I didn't know any better, what I'm saying is, will you please forgive me? So I'm asking for forgiveness. So all of that first category, whenever we've harmed someone or been harmed and didn't know any better, naturally our plea immediately is for forgiveness. Right? So that's the basis for this first. The second reason that we harm people or are harmed is through malicious intent. Right? And if you think about when we've done something maliciously, premeditatedly, it's because we were in a lot of pain. And if you'll go back to the very first thing that we started talking about, it's like, would you rather feel great or would you rather be in pain? Right? None of us want to be in pain. Any action that is premeditatedly malicious arises out of that. It doesn't arise out of peace, connection, feelings of safety, and so on. So we can see the second basis for forgiveness in that it arose out, the actions, in a way, emerged out of another person's or our own inability to experience the life that they wanted to experience. Which in a way falls back into the first category of, well, if I knew how to create a peaceful atmosphere, in myself and carry that into the world, the malicious possibility would be totally removed at the roots, if you follow what I'm saying. So the practice of forgiving is a bit more subtle than it seems. It isn't necessarily to practice forgiving some external force or person that seemingly has harmed us. It's to turn that into ourselves and reflect on the times where we have asked for forgiveness or we're ashamed at having done some silly thing. Okay? And the way to practice that is to imagine what we can do so that we don't do those things anymore. What qualities would you like to learn to embody and express such that whatever that thing was in the past that you're ashamed of or that you didn't know any better becomes impossible? Creating yourself in such a way where you're, in a way, creating yourself such that you're real time remedying your own shortcomings is the most forgiving thing you can do. You follow? The most forgiving thing that I can do is to ensure that I'm not a silly person in the world anymore. And the way to do that is to be honest with myself, is to, in a way, forgive myself, if you follow. Right? Okay. So then we can see, without even touching that point 4, creating, we can see that if we were to become more centered, more appreciative, grateful, thankful, more forgiving of ourselves and others, that we would be a different person, right? We would literally be a different person. We would think differently, we would speak differently, we would act differently. Our motivation would be totally different, right? I often say sometimes it's like, last night in class we were talking about Scrooge or something, and he's visited by one of the Christmas ghosts, and the Christmas ghost has this sort of ball and chain around his ankle, and he can't move around, he's like stuck. He's like, don't do this thing, or whatever. So what forgiveness practice does is it removes all of the psychological burdens that we're carrying around with us. Okay? We said that we wanted freedom of movement, fluidity, flexibility, adaptability. The forgiveness exercises literally remove all of the shackles that we're doing to ourselves in a way, psychologically. It's like looking at the world. It's like driving down the street with 3D glasses on. It's like there's a distorted image in front of our eyes. Even though your eyes are open, you have this sort of lens, this film over your eyes that creates a distorted picture of reality. So the forgiving exercises are like, hey, just take off the 3D glasses. You know what I'm saying? Just take the 3D glasses off so you can see the road like it really looks. Right? So anyway, what is my point? My point is that without even entering what a creative exercise looks like, the more centered we become, the more thankful we become, the more forgiving we become, we've literally also simultaneously become a different person. We've created a different being in here. Right? So it's really only at that point that we can say we are creating. Once we've become centered, once our heart has opened out, without discrimination of who's benefited me and who hasn't benefited me, of who I want to help and who I don't want to help, only then can we actually create something. Right? Now, just to touch on this so this doesn't get too long. What does creating look like? It looks like, well, when you leave class today, what is the best thing you can do with your time? What would you like to do this year? Have you thought about what activities will help you move closer towards that possibility? maybe you should do those things when you leave class. What would you like to do with this next decade that you just started? Maybe what would you like to do as a career? Wouldn't it be amazing to never retire? To love what you do so much that it's just, you do it until you're like, I'm giving my life, I'm talking about doing, you know what I mean? Right? I want to be doing this until I can't breathe anymore, you know? Now how amazing would that be? Right, so if we can think about that, what is the most meaningful thing we can aspire to? What activity fills us up with so much joy and enthusiasm and energy when we think about it? Whatever that is, do that, please. Right? So you can see that if you have defined what that thing is, you can see when I leave class, this thing is a waste of time. This thing is a good use of time. Throughout this year, this thing is a waste of time. This thing is a good use of time, and so on. Now, the reason I'm suggesting that activity can't actually begin until we've opened our heart out to everyone without prejudice, bias, discrimination, is because then we can be sure that we're not just mechanically, robotically repeating cycles or whatever. The mechanical, robotic repetition of cycles is like not knowing how to get to 7-Eleven. I think I know, but I never make it there. Or whatever. So meditation as a broad thing, when it's really understood, is like a road or a path that we can walk that takes us every step closer towards understanding how to create the meaning we want to experience.